Hello, everyone. This is Coffee Chug, and welcome to episode 26 on Living on the Edge of Chaos podcast series. Today, we have an amazing um, author and person who is doing some amazing work in her latest book, Why Smart Kids Worry. And if you're able to see, if you're watching from the video perspective, obviously, if you're listening audio, you won't see it, but the link to the book is in the show notes. But the book I will hold up here on my screen is Why Smart Kids Worry and what parents can do to help. So, Allison, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today.
Thanks for letting me.
So, why don't we start out for those that maybe don't know who you are? Why don't you kind of explain who you are and what you do?
Okay. I am a child psychotherapist, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. And I spend my day working with smart, anxious kids in therapy and giving them tools and more recently, the parents' tools on how to help their kids.
And I think one of the things when I came across your book, one of the things that I think makes this book so powerful is that you focus not only on the kid but also on the parents. And I think both of those are two very, very important issues, especially when it comes to anxiety and stress and things of that nature. One, to help kids develop those skills to kind of cope with those issues. But then on the flip side, I know from a parent angle, sometimes as parents you feel helpless in terms of helping your child. And so maybe to take one step back from that is, how did you find yourself heading down this path of looking at kids and in the case of your book, smart kids, but then coming across that anxiety and stress topic?
Well, when I started my practice, it was about 10 years ago. I started it about 2 blocks from the most academic school in town, and I had no idea what I would get. I figured I would get, some anxiety, some kids of divorce, but what I got is smart, anxious kids over and over again, and I could not find anything about it. I could not find anything that told me really the connection, and so I started just doing my own research on it and understanding that these kids were worrying about the same things. And I was like every session, it seemed like the same story. So I just gathered information and wrote the book. But it wasn't planned. It wasn't like I was looking for it. It just sort of found me.
Yeah, and I know on page 4 you have a definition of what you consider a smart kid, and I really fell in love with the definition. Kind of my backstory is I taught sixth grade social studies and literature for 5 years, and then I moved into the gifted education realm for 5 years before taking on this new job as an instructional coach. And it was amazing working with the gifted world and seeing things through that lens, how many misconceptions there are about what we would consider smart or gifted or any of those labels. But your definition, you state that a smart kid is the ability to take ideas and skills to the next level. And that really, really stood out to me. And I look at it from both a parent and an educator point of view, because I think it opens itself up to looking at kids in a multitude of ways and not just landlocking them, I guess, from the education level of just data points, which don't always paint the whole picture of a kid. And so, how did you craft that definition? Like, what kind of sparked you to want to come up with, I guess, a new definition of what a smart kid is?
It was, in a parent session actually one day, and I just, she's a parent, like, I'm trying to explain to my kids that the argument we had does not mean that we're getting divorced. My spouse does not mean we're getting divorced. And I remember her saying, I don't understand why they just can't just leave it there. Why do they have to take it? And I was like, to the next level. And she's like, yeah, everything's the next level. And it's just interesting. That's how a lot of my stuff in the book came. It just sort of from talking to parents and understanding that this kid, you give them information, and instead of just taking it at face value, their mind allows them to just create something bigger. And the next level is great in some ways, and it's terrifying in others. And that's sort of I kept coming back to that same scenario with kids, so that's kind of how I started defining it.
Yeah, and in your book too, you also touch on what I think is a pretty hot topic, and you talk about natural ability and how natural ability can override hard work. And I know that as a society, and I know as an educator, and I know that I've made this statement 1,000 times about if you just work hard enough, just work harder, work harder, work harder. But there is that sense of reality where sometimes people are just given a gift, a talent that no matter how hard you work, you can't attain. I mean, I played basketball my whole life, and no matter how hard I work, I'm never going to be the LeBron James or Kobe Bryant. It's just not in my genetic makeup, unfortunately, because I couldn't jump more than about 4 inches off the ground. Um, and so, as you share those ideas, both in the book and maybe when you're out speaking and talking with people, do you ever get any? I don't want to call it heat, but do people argue that thought with you, or do you find people agreeing? Because I think it's something that people don't like to talk about. I almost feel like it's taboo that we just say if you have, but it's also reality, And so I was just curious. That's more of a personal curiosity question: is do people respond to that, or not really?
They do, and they do, and I think you're onto something. They do respond to it often negatively. With we like to talk about effort. We're an effort society, so a lot of parents are saying we don't care what your grades are. We just want the effort to be there. But if your effort is not, you don't have to put a lot into it, but you get A's. Why stay up till past 10 o'clock? Because I'm gonna get a 99. Why do it? And so I tell parents they have a point. What's the if you
Yes.
can get away with it, society rewards that, and they're being rewarded. But yeah, I think that is something that a sticking point for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And you also touch on another idea, and that's what I love about this book is you touch on a lot of key ideas that I think are pressing issues that need to be brought to the forefront more and more in this book. And you also talk about the whole issue of homework, and you've kind of alluded to that already. If you already have the concepts and you haven't mastered, why do I need to keep pushing myself in something, and I think some of that leads into I think the culprit of or not the culprit of the book, but the kind of the theme of the book, which is how do we deal with this anxiety and stress? What's causing it, and then when we're feeling it, how do we kind of come to terms with it? Um, and for those that haven't read the book, you kind of talk about that there's different types of anxiety. Um, so for those that haven't listened, can you give just kind of a brief description on what you see as those different types of anxiety?
So if you look at if you Google anxiety, you're going to come up with 6, 7, 8, depends on what you're googling, types of anxiety. But I like to think of it in sort of two broad categories, and that people usually worry about people or they worry about things. And the reason that I set it up that way is because if we know what triggers us, then we have power. We feel like we can have some control. So what I would see is kids and adults, they either worry about what people think of them, not being good enough, measuring up to standards, or they worry about storms and natural disasters. And very few people worry about both. And when I found that to be true, I'm like, so you worry about things? And people are like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay. I put this in the book, but I thought it was kind of an interesting analogy. It's like if you had to drive, through a rainstorm to give a speech, what would you worry about? The speech or the rainstorm? And for me, I know certainly I don't care what's going on outside of the car. I'm thinking about getting there and not embarrassing myself.
Right.
But a lot of people would say, well, the storm, And so I found these two camps of people. And when I started defining it in two broad categories, it was simple. Instead of going, is this OCD? Is this panic disorder? It's just easier to say I worry about people, and that's going to be a trigger for me, and I need to work on that.
Right.
So that's kind of how I define it.
And I love that. And I would definitely, I'm in the same boat as you. If I have a speaking engagement or a presentation, I'm not worried about anything but what I'm about to say, and hopefully I don't come across like an idiot. So I'm oblivious to everything around me as I'm trying to get to that destination in hopes that I make an impact and survive. And so what I loved about the book, and it hit me really on a parent level, is like my son has been dealing with a lot of anxiety. He's 9, and what you described, I felt like you were like bugging my house because the relational anxiety piece that you talk about is him completely to a T. And it completely like opened my eyes to going, that's it. Like I see it, and I think that's the power of the book. The benefit for a lot of parents to read this is because it helped kind of bring things into context. And you did a really nice job with that in terms of I was able to go, that is my son. Or, and then my daughter is completely the opposite. She's not relational at all. And my third daughter, the youngest, just doesn't, I don't think, will ever have anxiety. She just, life is whatever she wants to make it. Um, and I think the true power of this book then is you provide some tools in there. And so I had my son sample the squared breathing. And they're very, very simple tools that he can use. And he actually just used it last week on a math test, and he said it worked wonders. And so it was amazing. So how do you come across these tools, and how do you kind of figure out which tools kind of work best and don't work, and what was that process like?
It was a long process, honestly. I mean, so what we do is, mindfulness is a hot topic, and we want kids to be mindful. And what I found is I couldn't get kids to breathe. They just wouldn't do it because
Right.
they're active. They want to play in my office, run around, and I'm like, no, let's sit here and breathe. And they're like, forget it. But what I would do is say, okay, I want, let's breathe and let's count to four. And it sort of puts some structure to it because instead of just breathe, it's like we're going to do one round of this, and there's a completion part to it. And then they're counting at the same time, and then I'm making the connection with it's a square. Think of it as a square. So it's trying to get them to take a deep breath. And kids, this is very foreign to them. They take a huge, and then that's the breath. I'm like, no, no, no. So it's been that the breathing thing was a real challenge for me. But square breathing works, and they all do it. It's funny. This kid in class said, I know you work with my classmate because I saw him counting on his leg the other day during the test. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So they can notice other kids doing it, which is really interesting. But the other tools, a lot of them just came sort of organically. Like a kid would say, I'm worried about the future and I don't know what to do about that. And I would say, well, you've got too much on your plate. And then I would came up with brain plate, and we
Right.
made a plate, and so a lot of it just happened, from what they needed, and I created a tool in it. But
Yeah. And you talked about mindfulness there, and that is, it feels like that's becoming more and more prominent in a lot of ideas. I was just reading a book, and I can't remember if he's a senator. He's in politics. Tim Ryan has a book on mindfulness and how he's trying to get mindfulness into all schools, helping kids, with the breathing and kind of calming the mind. And I recently started trying to do some just basic meditation, which is just breathing exercises, and it's tough. It's tough as an adult. I find myself completely out in left field in about 3 minutes, and so I can definitely see that struggle with kids. Um, is there a tool that, since the book has been published, that you wish would have been in there? I mean, there's so many amazing tools, and so as I was reading, I was like, man, I wonder what else, because I know like books are, once they hit that publication thing, it's permanent. It's kind of like there it is. But since it's come out, I mean, has there other tools you wish you would have put in, or tools that people have shared that you're like, ooh, that I need to mark that down?
yeah, a lot of them. I was thinking after the book, was thinking I could have parents do this, creative parents. Like one is called Brain Tangle, and I take like a whole thing of yarn and I make my office a brain tangle. And this is like the most fun thing that we do. And so kids say I get all tangled up when, and they take this yarn and they take it around the room, and it's amazing. I have these pictures of this. My entire office is a brain tangle, and then we sit and look at it, and we say, "This is what's going on in your brain." And
Mm.
then, kids would say, "Why don't I take the yarn home and make one in my room?" So I thought I should have put this in the book because parents and kids could sit there, go to the store, get a huge thing of yarn, and make this huge brain tangle. And say, "Mom, this is my brain," or "Dad, this is my brain," and the whole room is a tangle. So I kind of was like, "Oh, I miss." But at the time it was just like simple, practical. But yeah, if I wrote another book, I'd probably have 20 more, 15, 20, 30 more, because it's just like every day I feel like I come up with something. Or
Right.
kids, often do too. So
Yeah, yeah, and that's something I think the beauty that of your website, where you do keep things updated. And I'll make sure I put a link in the show notes so people can see that, um, because that's where I came across you is through your website, and actually through, I think you had something published through Ian Bird on his birdseed TV
Yeah.
or channel, and I think the brain plate was on there, and it just got me just a spiral. So it goes to that idea of sharing and how far it connects. If we transition this conversation a little bit and we move away from maybe parents and just kids individually and looking at like for teachers or educators, and here we are, we've got these classes of 25 to 30 kids, and we had these kids with all these different types of anxiety, and different types of stresses and things going on. As an educator, I mean, what would be some things that we should be aware of, or things that maybe we could do to help with maybe reduce some of that stress or anxiety? Or is that even feasible when you see 30 kids all at once? I mean, it's one of those things where I read this, and as a parent, it was awesome. With my kid, it's awesome. So then I'm like, okay, so what's the next step? How do we help bridge to make the culture of learning a little less stressful and a little less anxiety driven? So is there anything, tips for like teachers or educators, that have all these elements in their class every single day, all day long?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. When I started out as a teacher, and I had a practicum with a woman who played classical music all day in her classroom. And I remember thinking, this is exactly what I'm going to do. Because I would go to all these classrooms. It was a school, it was a training school. So you go into classrooms and you hear noise and you hear buzz and you hear, which some of that's good. And then you walk into her classroom and I was like, ah. And I remember thinking, that's what I'm going to do. And so when I was a teacher, I did that. And when I was a school counselor, I did that. So kids would come in, it set a tone. And it's interesting now, I'll have kids say, my teacher plays music. It's like it just sets a different tone. And it's like some of that stuff is so simple. You just have you just have a channel, you have whatever CD,
Right.
but it sets the mood and the whole class, especially anxiety, you feed off of everyone. So if it's chaos and there's a lot of like, okay, and I know they have a lot to do, teachers, of course, but if you can do it in a way that calms kids down, they're actually more effective. And kids will do better if they're calm. I mean, period. So things like that, it's just a tone. You still get the same amount of work done, but you do it in a way that kids are able to kind of just relax. And it's funny, kids will say, "Yeah, the teacher who plays music," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's good," So just little things like that. And plus, I mean, there's a lot of tools. I work with teachers a lot, and just tell them like, here are things you can do. A lot of that is giving kids an out when they're really stressed out. If you can get out of the classroom for 3 minutes and come back, so you just go, and kids can reset. So there's a lot of things that but it's just the overall tone to me is the most important thing.
Yeah, I like that. I think it comes back to just building that culture, that environment where it feels safe. And definitely
Yes.
that's one piece to that puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And music. I mean, there's all sorts of research about the power of music. Um, you know, if you want to find it. Um, so, what would be so if you're a parent and you're listening to this and you want to learn more, obviously, I know the first step would be to read the book. But what would be some other resources or coping strategies, the things that a parent could go and check out to continue this journey? So, like, I've read your book and I've got pages and pages of notes, and things that I'm trying. But then like what else? What would be some other places or paths or avenues to explore?
Well, one book I love and I recommend it almost daily is The Highly Sensitive Child. 90% of kids who have anxiety are also highly sensitive. And when I tell people to read that book, they come back the next week and go, "Whoa!" They they've read so much about anxiety, but they did not read about sensitivity. And those are it's sort of one of the same. And so it's like, well, my kid's highly sensitive, and parents actually parent better because of that book. So that's one avenue. Then the other thing is to keep, which I love Birdseed with Ian, because you have to keep the mind engaged. So in the summer, you can't expect anxious kids to just be happy and peaceful because their minds are going 100 miles an hour. So I always say, engaged, engaged, engaged. Give them, I told the parents the other day, buy a 24 pack of Play-Doh and a big board from Michael's. One of those big foam or cardboard,
Yeah.
huge poster boards, and say, "Honey, create a city." And she came back the next week. She's like, "Yeah, we're good." The daughter goes home. She creates this world, this city with Play-Doh and markers, and she's happy. And I'm like, yeah, because she has something to think about.
Right.
So those sorts of things, you got to give kids something. This whole, they're calm, they're not really thinking. Anxious kids are going to think all the time. Right. It's just we have to change what they think about. So
I like that.
Yes, those are the biggies, you know.
Yeah. So as we start to bring this to a close here, so what's probably through all the work that you do, what's the most important to you when it comes to your work? I mean, why is it that why do you do what you do?
Well, I do what I do because I was that kid, and my mom was that parent. It was a great parent. She had no idea what to do with me, basically. And when I was 4, I started worrying about things and future far things, and that's what I do. What I do is because I wanted to help kids like me, and to me, the point is empowerment. And if you can, my whole goal with working with a child is giving them tools, and when they leave, they think, okay, I can handle this. And just knowing that you have something in your back pocket eases anxiety. And so most of this is generalized anxiety, which means it's going to be there. I just want to empower, give kids tools, give parents tools, and let them. These kids are going to be so successful, these smart, anxious ones. I'm like, you guys are going to rule the world. You just have to be able to channel this, So to me, that's the best case scenario for me. It's not that anxiety goes away, but they know how to manage it.
Right. And I love that answer because I've been working on a blog post, and it's still a very rough form, but it's around that idea of that empowerment and providing, this toolbox of things for kids, and going to, what is the main purpose of education? Why do we have kids come to school every day for 8 hours a day or whatever it might be? And is it so much that we cram their head with facts and information, or is it more that we're equipping them to be able to handle life? And whether we're dealing with anxiety or problem solving, or how to come up with innovative solutions or how to work with people, and there's this constant kind of battle, and everybody has their own philosophies, but I'm starting to, I guess, really, really become more of an advocate for that learning process where, maybe it's not so important to know every single president, but more, if I don't know, how do I go about finding that information? Or I'm really stressed for a test. Do I just freak out, or do I have the tools? Have I been given the tools and the opportunity to learn how to deal? And I think that this book and the tips and tools that you offer are things that we really need to work with kids with, in schools. Because the reality is not everybody has enough time. And I know it's easy to say make time, but if you're a family and both parents are working, or you're a single parent family raising, more than one kid, it's tough. And so these are things that I think could help the education process, as well as help parenting and help kids and their well-being. I mean, there's a whole gamut of things, and they're so simple, and I think that's what I love best about the book. All the tools, they don't take much time, they don't take much effort, but they can be very impactful with what we're doing. Is there any other ideas that you have that you want to get out there for people that'll be listening into this, or checking out the video that we didn't cover? Because there's so much, but I think the key thing is they have to go out and read the book. So I'm really highly promoting this book because I think it's really worthwhile. But is there something that you want to get out there? I always like to make sure I leave that window open for you.
Currently, I'm doing a lot of speaking, and I find that if I can just get in front of people, that the information is more meaningful. The book is great, but if I can so I'm doing a lot of that, and that to me, I'm going to parent groups, but I'm going to kids. And as a teacher and school counselor, I love that environment to get in front of kids and say, look, I get it. I was there. I remember what it was like. Here's what you can do. You're going to be okay.
Right.
And to me, that's when I can see kids look at me and go, really? Yeah, you're going to be all right. Here's what let's try this. To me, that's the most meaningful. So I do a lot of work in my practice, and I do a lot of writing, but in front of people, it's to me the most meaningful thing I'm doing currently is just trying to get in front of people. So I'm doing a lot of that, and that's important. And I'm always writing, so I'll be working on future things.
Awesome. Yeah, and there's definitely that the power of face to face is something that
Yeah.
technology and the written word can never quite replace. There's something about that person to person interaction that I think is you know you just got to be part of it to feel the energy and the vibe of whatever happens. So, well, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate you carving out some time out of your day to speak with us about this. For those that are listening, I will leave the link to the book so you can check that out, as well as a link to her website where you can find out more information, as well as all the other links to connect with Allison. And thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today.
Thank you.
Awesome.